Styron is currently the Quality Enhancement Plan Director and Professor of Leadership and Teacher Education at the University of South Alabama. He has received numerous awards, including Principal of the Year, Louisiana PTA Educator of Distinction, and several outstanding conference research paper awards. He has received over $3 million in grants, and he is a frequent attendee at the WMSCI conference. So, and he'll be speaking with his daughter, I think, Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes, Jennifer is the brains of the operation, so we can't forget about Jennifer. You guys who have been seeing me here the last few years know I've talked a lot about what happened 4 years ago at the University of South Alabama. The university decided to work with STEM disciplines and health sciences to improve critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. Collectively, the university was not pleased with student achievement in those courses. There were a lot of indicators that showed that we needed to do a better job in those classes with our students. So out of that became a movement, a program called the Quality Enhancement Plan. After the Quality Enhancement Plan was established, then the next question was, well, now that we said we want to improve those factors, how do we do it? So there was various committees that looked at data and concluded that the use of an instructional strategy called team-based learning was one way to improve those aspects in those courses. So what I'm going to talk to you today about, myself and Jennifer, the first part of that program had to do with implementing team-based learning in all the courses. Those courses were face-to-face classes. But the problem that soon flashed to the surface was the fact that many programs were totally online and many courses were online. So the challenge became, well, how do we deliver these instructional strategies that appeared to be working in face-to-face classes online? So we realized that we needed to incorporate a number of different technologies. Starting 2 or 3 years ago, we began experimenting with those different technologies, and today we're going to talk about the state of that movement. We have found that there are 4 technologies: the comprehensive assessment of team member effectiveness, InteDashboard, VoiceThread, and WebEx. By blending those 4 technologies together, you can deliver team-based learning in online environments. Team-based learning is a form of collaborative learning. This idea of having group work was at the core of this movement, predicated on the assumption that when you have students working in groups or teams, it's called in team-based learning, that you facilitate and you encourage discussion and participation, a form of active learning. And the reason why we felt this was so important is because there have been quite a few studies that have indicated that when students are involved in discussion, they remember 70% of the content that was addressed after 2 weeks. So just as I'm here this morning speaking to you, I mean, research indicates you can remember very little of what I'm telling you. It was that same principle in classrooms. The predominant model was professors standing in front of students and lecturing, and a lot of regurgitation of information regarding low-level thinking skills, and 2 weeks later, students couldn't remember what they learned. Interesting enough, beyond that is advising students. Sometimes students can't even remember the class that they took. And it's almost humorous to be working with a student and I'm arguing with them. Yeah, 3 years ago, you took this class. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. It's on your transcript. What building was it in? What did the teacher look like? Oh, yeah, I remember that. So there were a lot of indicators that were demonstrating to us that we had to change the model, predominant model of instruction in our classrooms. Those bottom 2 fields, when students participate in discussion, and then part of this whole mindset had to do with culminating activities, and these are some examples of those culminating activities. An issue we dealt with right up front was, I didn't coin the term group hate, but many students hate group work. So we had to flesh out that issue. Why did many students hate group work? Because there wasn't an even way or a fair way to record grades or acknowledge the work that students did. Many students, when you talked about group work, here's the kind of story they would tell you. I hate group work. Well, why do you hate group work? Because I remember when I took Computer Technology 1, I was in a group and I did all the work. The rest of the group could care less. And it's not fair because they all got an A just like I got an A. Or conversely, I was the only one in that group who cared about the project. And because the other team members pulled me down, I got a lower grade in that class. That's not fair. So team-based learning was one way to address this idea of group work, because while there's a lot of team activities, there are still individual assessments that students have to complete, and it's a major part of their grade. So it does not promote this idea of social loafing, which is something we have to be cautious of when we get into group work. Another driving motivation regarding the movement towards this active learning, this collaboration, critical thinking, was feedback we got from employers. Essentially, if I could sum up what employers were telling us, is that, well, your students may know stuff, but they're not the kind of people we'd want to hire. Well, why? Because they can't think on their feet, they don't know how to work with the other members of the organization, and they have trouble communicating. If they have those 3 skills, we can teach them the stuff they need to be successful in our business. So we got all these various messages and became very important for us to implement this program. Now, specifically regarding the model for the course where we use these multiple technologies, we use a backward design model, which means we first decided where we wanted to end, and that is on the far right. Yeah, thank you, Jim. If you look at the far right of this model, this is where you begin planning modules. You decide where you want to end, and then we go back to the beginning and decide how do we prepare our students for this culminating project. And this is where we have activities, whatever they may be. In this particular case, there were a lot of course videos, PowerPoints, and then we flipped out of class quite a few assignments that they basically did on their own. We had voiceover PowerPoints that they had to review and study on their own time. After we felt that they had mastered this type of content, we wanted to be sure that they mastered the content. And this is where the readiness assurance part of the project came in that there were individual tests, team tests. We then assessed that, and we allowed students to appeal, which is an interesting concept. It empowered students to use their brains. And then we provided corrective action based on that feedback, and then we moved on to application activities, application of the content that they had learned at this first part of the model. There was teamwork, where students worked on application activities using a model called the 4S. We had application activities that dealt with a significant problem. It was the same problem across groups. There was a specific choice, and there was simultaneous reporting. And then after we went through these application activities, which again were what I would consider low-level application activities, we went on to more advanced application activities in an asynchronous environment, and this is where the teams came up with team projects that were built upon these other activities throughout the model. And the culminating project was this exam that we had at the end of the semester. Again, this ad nauseum amount of literature that shows just how important this model is, how it can improve critical thinking, collaboration, grades, active learning, active participation, engagement, and also improve retention, which was the most astounding most astounding part of the data we've collected at South Alabama, was the retention and persistence in the classes where this strategy was used was significantly higher than the same classes, in some cases with the same teachers who are using traditional models. Striking. So there's 4 technologies I mentioned earlier: InteDashboard, WebEx, VoiceThread, And virtual office hours are those 4 technologies, and then my daughter is going to go through each one of those. She has some video clips that were pulled out from the class and some other videos that were provided by the owners of these companies.
So I think it's important to kind of talk about the tools, which is what we really wanted to do today. We have a lot of research, but show how these tools are being utilized. I find a lot of times when I talk to faculty who are interested in doing this, they're kind of scared of the technology. And so by providing examples, they realize that it's approachable and it is something feasible for them to do in their classes. So the first piece that we have to use is WebEx. And the reason that we needed WebEx is because we needed a platform to deliver these synchronous sessions. So show of hands, has anybody been to a webinar or a conference online and used WebEx? Okay, it's a very familiar tool. A lot of people use it. One of the primary reasons we used it is because it is what our university supports. The second reason being that it allows you to break out teams. So one aspect or important aspect of team-based learning is that when you put students in permanent teams, that they complete their activities with those teams throughout the semester. So that increases accountability. If I don't come to class prepared week 1, week 2, you're asking me about it because your grade is being impacted by your lack of being prepared. So essentially, this is developed by WebEx. It allows you to deliver polling, lectures, breakout sessions. It increases your collaboration and learning. And so we use this for 2 pieces in our class. We use it for virtual office hours every week. So we have 4 faculty who are using this right now every week from 8 to 10 p.m. We are online with our students. Give you a little background, we're using this in a program evaluation and quality improvement class. So our last speaker, the PDCA model is what we use in this for our nursing students, their graduate students. So when they come to class, initially we're teaching them how to utilize SPSS so they can look at data on their floors, see where there's gaps, maybe a root cause issue. Then they're going to develop a QI plan for us. And based on that QI plan, we'll talk about metrics and how you're going to measure it. Then we're going to have our TBL sessions. And then finally, they'll have a culminating project in which they show us the PDCA model that they put in place and determine whether or not it was effective. So virtual office hours help us because they're not really familiar with SPSS. We're able to pull up their screen, walk them through issues they may be having. Some teams send 1 team member as a representative, but they find that that's a lot more meaningful than sending us an email or getting a response on the forum, just because sometimes things get lost in translation. So essentially what I've done here is just shown you from the moderator view what we're doing. So when we get into the live session, essentially what I have to do is start this breakout. And because I have permanent teams, I can't manually let the system do this. So as members come in, I set up team rooms, and then I'm going to pull over people in the class. I'll pull over a facilitator, which is a faculty member, and then my student teams, and I'll create each of these teams. So I have a coordinator of this class, and at this time while I'm doing this process, she's talking to the students about the TBL session, what they should be expecting this evening. They've all taken their IRAP before coming to class, and then we'll break them out into their groups. And so what you see here is actually students moving from a main room to a breakout room with their team. Then I have my moderator share their screen and pull up InteDashboard, which we will talk about next. But essentially the team will discuss the team test. They'll tell their moderator which answers they'd like selected. And as the moderator selects them, they get simultaneous feedback. They'll see a red X if it's incorrect. They'll see a green X if they progress to the next one. If they get a red X, they're able to proceed forward because we do point splitting here. So if you get it right on the first attempt, you get full points, second half, third, a fourth, and then if it takes you all 4 responses, you get none. And then they come back into this room together, and then we actually do the full session. So we have the ability in this platform to not only talk to the group at large, we have about 100 students in this class, but also break them out into their teams to do individual work. And then again, sometimes it's just helpful. The student view is very similar to the moderator view. So from the student view, they can see everybody who's in the class up here. Once the breakout rooms are established, they'll see their team down there. Sometimes somebody will say, hey, you forgot Ron on your team. And so I'll have to go back and move him into the breakout before we go through it, but typically I don't do that. Here's the breakout room. So as the student is waiting for the moderator to share their screen, which takes a couple of seconds, and pull up InteDashboard, this is what they're going to see. And you'll see this is the student's mouse right here. But essentially my moderator is going to, when the TRAT pulls up, start the TRAT. And then as students talk and say, I'd like you to select Team B or option C, they'll see their responses simultaneously. So this is something that the students can also do from their end using InteDashboard, but we feel that it's best to have a moderator in the room so that we have a faculty to kind of look through that process and then also make the decisions so that we don't have any issues with the technology. And then this is them moving back into their main room. So that's WebEx. Now what's really exciting I'd like to talk to you about today is InteDashboard. So we've done this for 2 years now. The first system I used was called LAMS. It was called the Learning Activity Management System. And it's an online open source platform that you can utilize to do active learning activities. And so I was able to use that system through contacting a faculty in Australia and Singapore. The problem is that I'm not a computer science person, and there was a lot of programming involved on the back end. So it was extremely complicated for me to set it up, and I am an instructional technologist background. So if I'm having trouble setting it up, I knew to actually get people to adopt this technology was going to be difficult because it was going to be a challenge for them to put it in. So we met the co-founder of Cognate. It's a company devoted to applying brain science to improving learning outcomes. And it was a company developed or conceived at Duke and their partner, National University of Singapore. And they developed it after this same founder who utilized TBL built 40 modules with 4 different systems. And it was frustrating, you know, there were so many technologies that needed to be deployed, and so he came up with InteDashboard, which allows you to deploy many of these things in this one system. And so what we utilized it for this semester was our readiness assurance test, so that's that individual test, and then also our team test. But moving forward, it was so successful, we'll probably embed our application activities in it, and they're actually working with CATME now to embed the peer evaluation system. So again, from the student perspective, they would only have a login for InteDashboard versus 4 or 5 different technologies we're asking them to use. And so you saw a little bit of this on the, on the previous slide, but this is, let me just, okay, I guess I started with the student view. So this is what the student view is going to see. Until I activate that test, it's not going to show online, but it does update synchronously. So as soon as I start that test, students will see it pop up. And there it is, it popped up, and so they'll say, I'm ready to start the TRAT or the IRAT in this case. They have a timer, so it's a timed test, and then they'll have to select the correct answers. If it's incorrect, they get the red X. They can proceed forward, getting partial credit for their answers, and they'll move through the test like this. Once they're done, they'll hit submit, and I think I just went ahead and kind of moved forward, and they'll show that their TRAT has been finished. And so they can also view their grades in this system, which is nice. In LAMS, I was having my moderators actually tell me how many attempts per question, then I'd have to go back and calculate those scores. Now InteDashboard not only lets my students see their scores immediately, but I also have them reported. Now this is the moderator view, so as the moderator, I say I'm ready to start the TRAT. And the really nice thing about this system is here is all the teams I set up right here. And so as these teams are in remote locations completing their tests, I can quickly see which questions they're getting right on the first attempt, which ones they're currently working on that are not completed, and where my areas that they're not sure are. So this is very useful to me because when I move forward right after this into my clarification lecture, I already know 1, 3, and 4 team 2 struggled on. I need to cover that. And so as this semester I had 12 teams going, this was really useful because I wasn't able to do that with paper-based methods. So that's kind of what InteDashboard looks like on the back end for faculty. And then so as I kind of was walking you through, we utilized TBL. You saw those synchronous activities on that model. That culminating project for us is their QI plan. And so what we utilize for them to demonstrate their QI plan, since we have students across the U.S. and in a couple of countries, is VoiceThread. And it's a cloud application that allows students to share and create content online. So that it's kind of similar to Google Drive. How many of you guys have used VoiceThread? So we do have a couple. I knew Risa would probably have used it before. But it's an asynchronous tool, but it gives you an alternative way to engage students as opposed to a text-based forum. Some of you guys have forums in your online classes. Anybody? Do you find at times it can be really boring to go through the threads and read them? Students are saying the same exact things. There's really no collaboration or engagement. We have found this tool to be extremely helpful in increasing that communication and collaboration. And so essentially they share their projects with their teams after they're completed, and then they receive dynamic feedback, so that's increasing collaboration. And so what I've got here is I'll show you an example. JA on the left-hand side here, these are the voice threads that have been recorded. So JA is from the team that is giving their quality improvement plan. They looked at HCAP scores in the hospitals, found that noise was an issue. So they're talking about their metrics that they're using for noise disturbance. You'll see a second student here is going to come in and ask a question, and then that team member is going to come back and respond.
Outcome measures focus on the following 3 metrics.
Ooh. Sorry about that. Well, the volume, oh, I need to hit function, I believe. Or not. Let me turn it down this way. It's still pretty loud. Okay. I'm sorry? Which volume is that? Okay. Bring this one down? Bring all of them down. Oh, okay. All right, let's give it a try.
Outcome measures focus on the following 3 metrics. Care-related outcomes are those that improve patient care. Noise reduction can lead to decreased psychological effects such as sleep deprivation, stress, and healing times, all of which can decrease the patient's length of stay. Patient-related outcomes influence patient perceptions and preferences. By reducing noise levels, patient satisfaction increases and symptoms decrease, which can lead to increased quality of life. Finally, performance-related outcomes are those that reflect the quality of care provided. Decreased noise levels provide an increased quality of care, thereby increasing hospital performance scores and decreasing hospital costs.
So I'm a little curious as to how there's a correlation in decreased cost for the hospital based on increased performance scores. I don't know whether you're alluding to the fact that because they have a decreased length of stay, then they have decreased costs, or based on improved performance, they'll get higher reimbursement and then have decreased out-of-pocket costs. I'm not really sure where you're going with that. I was just curious if somebody could give me some clarification. I'm sure that it's true. I'm just wondering at which angle you're approaching that. Thank you.
Hi, Cheryl. I think that with the use of DRGs for reimbursements, longer lengths of stay do result in less reimbursement, especially if patients acquire some of the infections that are not being reimbursed now, such as a central line.
And so that's just an example. So many of my threads have about 20 student responses here, and what I'm finding is that although teams are assigned only to review one team's presentation, they're actually going into multiple presentations and leaving feedback because they're collaborating across these voice threads, which has been extremely interesting. And while this is pretty stagnant, there are some interactive tools where you can write on the screen, you can provide examples to other teams. It's just not the one that I chose to use for this presentation. And so the final system we use is CATME. It's called the Comprehensive Assessment of Team Member Effectiveness. It was developed based on an NSF grant at Purdue University. And essentially, it's a web-based peer evaluation tool that helps with individual accountability. So essentially what we use the tool for is we allow our students to pilot it at the beginning of the semester just to see how it works. At midterm, they will evaluate their teams in 5 different domains: contributing to team's work, interacting with your team, keeping on track, expecting quality, and then having relevant knowledge, skills, and abilities. And we provide, or the CATME system provides feedback to them. And so at midterm, we require you participate, but we don't give you a grade, because how are you to improve on being an effective team member if you don't know how to make improvements? So we utilize that midterm for them for self-evaluation, self-reflection, and then we have a final peer evaluation at the end. This is also useful to us so that we can see how teams are working together, and if there is an issue, we can intermediate before it becomes a whole semester kind of problem. And so here, I apologize to get everything on the screen. It's very tiny content, but these will be all of your team member names here. And right now, we are measuring on contributing to team's work. So what the system does is it gives you some descriptions, and then the student comes over here and for each team member selects where they think their level of performance is. And they'll do that for each of the 5 domains. The system is pretty flexible. They have based the 5 domains on research. However, you can add different domains. You can add questions if you have them, but we've found the standard assessment to be beneficial for us. And then essentially this is when the system sends back information to the students. That message says, congratulations, the members of the team have indicated you were an effective team member. It tells them how they rated themselves, how their teammates rated them, and then the average rating for your team. So very quickly, students can see, oh my gosh, I thought I was a good communicator, and my team rated me very low. And then beneath it, it gives you some research suggestions on how to make improvements in that domain. So our students have found it very helpful. They wish that there was a score associated with it. So Russell, going back to your, do you give the grade or do you give the feedback? Quite funny that they want the grade. But we find that we don't give the grade, and they find the tool very useful. It is. It absolutely is. And so the 4 considerations I give you is buy-in. It's difficult to change the mode of instruction from asynchronous to synchronous. I'm having a little kickback. You know, I have some faculty who are very big researchers. They don't have a lot of time to put into teaching. They like a asynchronous class that they just grade papers and look at the forums. And so trying to convey the importance of active learning in these classes to increase your critical thinking and communication, collaboration of students has been a consideration. Also training, not only for our faculty because they're not as tech savvy sometimes, but also our students. I think one of the presenters on Tuesday mentioned, you know, we think students are tech savvy, but it's really with social media. They're not tech savvy with regards to educational tools, so you have to let them know about the tool, how to use it effectively, so that way they maximize their outcomes as well. Course development, when you use TBL and then also integrating technologies, it can be time intensive up front. But once you kind of refine it, you've got it set, and it's really quite easy versus having to prepare for a lecture every semester. It is a bit difficult to manage multiple technologies, but that InteDashboard tool is very, very easy to use. We had actually 12 moderators for my 12 teams this semester. We had 4 faculty who have done TBL online. We had 8 who hadn't, and all 8, after doing one session, said we're interested in using it. It's so easy to use. So that's very positive with regard to them actually being able to integrate it. And then activity coordination, you are going to get some initial student resistance. At the beginning of the semester, we get kickback. None of our other classes are like this. We just read and we write our papers. I really hate working with teams. We'll give this a chance. We've gotten some really, really great feedback as far as student satisfaction goes, both on the CATME and our evaluations at the end of the semester, indicating to us that although initially they thought it was going to be more challenging, they really loved the structure of the class, and they really liked those virtual office hours. Just being able to have that faculty to student interaction time was really nice. And then flexibility is key. You know, Confucius said those who are inflexible will get bent out of shape frequently. To think that these tools will work perfectly every single time might be a little naive, but just go with the flow. You know, I've had some, particularly when we were using LAMs, some situations where the tools weren't working, and I would tell students, all right, we're going to plan B, and they were really okay with that because they appreciated the effort to integrate the technology even when it wasn't working. So we're in year 2 of deploying it in online environments. We are using the California Critical Thinking Skills Test to measure our critical thinking that happens throughout the class, as well as some student satisfaction, and then looking at our retention in those courses. We're going to expand to 2 online courses in the fall based on the 8 moderators who helped in our class this semester. And then current challenges you might want to think about is changing the culture. Again, this is a different kind of way of approaching online teaching and learning. So that's going to take some time. So, you know, find your adopters or your early innovators and let them try it, and then let word of mouth kind of filter through. Alternative solutions to reduce the number of technologies utilized. I think I touched on that. InteDashboard is really trying to be that comprehensive platform so that students really are only interacting with one platform. But the more you can reduce the number of technologies faculty are having to use, the greater probability that they're going to be interested in using it. And then finally, sustainability. So as my dad mentioned, the QEP faculty who are doing team-based learning get a $300 stipend. That's how I'm paying for VoiceThread. That's how I'm paying for a couple of these different technologies. So how sustainable is the project? If we truly want online teaching to be at the level as maybe comparable to face-to-face instruction, you know, at what price does that come? And then how do we make sure that we build that into the system so that teachers have the resources needed to deliver TBL online? And that's it. Thank you so much.